But if you don't want to, just ask your question with your video off, or you can go ahead and put questions in the chat. We'll be active in the chat for this event.
I got you. I'm just thinking how.
And if you are in the room, if you could go ahead and mute yourself, and if you're not asking a question, that would be great. So welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm really excited about our speakers for this event. Many of you are probably already familiar with BikeWorks. We are a Seattle-based nonprofit in Columbia City with a mission to promote the bicycle as a vehicle for change, to empower youth and build resilient communities. We do that through our youth and adult programs. Summer camps are now open on our website. We have a bicycle recycling initiative, a bike shop in Columbia City, and we also host community events for cyclists to build community together like this one. So I would just like to take a moment to thank our sponsors that make free events possible. BikeWorks is celebrating 25 years this year, and so thank you to our 25th anniversary event sponsors. I would like to also acknowledge that those of us who are in Seattle tonight are on the traditional lands of Indigenous people, including Coast Salish and Duwamish tribes, among others. So one of the ways that you can support the vitality of the Duwamish tribe who are not federally recognized is by making rent payments directly to the tribe at Real Rent Duwamish. And Real Rent the Duwamish tribe are also asking for signatures on a new petition so that they can become federally recognized. And so we are encouraging everybody to sign that petition when you have a chance. We're sharing that in the chat now. If you are not in Seattle, you can use this resource we're going to share in the chat, this native land map, to learn more about whose native lands you may be living or recreating on. So we encourage you to take some time there. And so without any further ado, I'm very excited to introduce our presenters. Marley Blonsky and Kaylee Kornhauser are fat bike adventurers working to make cycling more inclusive for people of all body sizes, especially people in larger bodies. They are the subjects of an upcoming Shimano film, All Bodies and Bikes, that explores their relationship to their bodies on bicycles and follows them on a bike packing trip through Oregon. Marley is based in Seattle, where she is a mom to 2 rescue dogs. You might see her around town on her cargo bike or out bike camping in the nicer weather, like today, very soon, maybe this weekend. And Kaylee is a PhD student at Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon, where she spends her time studying and biking through the nearby forest. So thank you, Marley and Kaylee, for being with us today. And without further ado, you are welcome to start presenting.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Gonna make sure that everybody can see.
We can see it. Looks great.
Great. Okay. 1 second. I'm going to open up my chat box so I can see if people have questions or comments as we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Kaylee Kornhauser, and presenting with Marley tonight. We're really excited to be here. Thanks so much to BikeWorks for having us. This is just a really great opportunity to connect with people, especially for me from out of town, to meet some more Seattle folks. So when COVID's a thing of the past, I can come up and ride with you all. We ask that folks keep their mics muted while we present, but feel free to turn your videos on if you'd like, and turn your microphone on if you'd like to share something, or we'll have the chat open and we'll be responding to questions and comments throughout the presentation. And we also really encourage folks to share resources and start conversations in the chat. Maybe you'll meet a new friend on there. And so really keep that going throughout. And if we bring up any files or links, we'll make sure that we share them out to you either in the chat or after the presentation in some way.
Yeah, so the way that this is going to work, so Kaylee and I are going to introduce ourselves. We'll be sharing quite a few personal stories. And we also recognize that, we're not the only fat cyclists out there. So if you have experiences to share, please feel free to, share those in the text, or excuse me, in the chat. Obviously, please keep it appropriate. Um, we are going to talk about, gear considerations, safety considerations, and some recommendations. But then we're also going to talk about building community. We're going to talk about how we can make group rides better. If you are somebody who leads group rides or interested in leading group rides, how you can make those more inclusive. What we can learn from other orgs, and then how to be a good ally to fat people. We'll then finish up with some discussion and Q&A. So let's dive in.
Great. We'll start with some introductions, who we are a little bit, and you'll learn more about us as we go. So I'm Kaylee. I use she, her pronouns. And as mentioned, I live down in Corvallis, Oregon. So if you're familiar, it's about an hour and a half south of Portland. And I go to Oregon State University. I'm a PhD student. I work in forestry. And I like all types of biking. I started biking because I couldn't afford a car and I needed to get to work. And then it became a passion of mine. So I think that's a pretty familiar story. Here in this picture, I'm mountain biking, but I really like all types. So anything on two wheels. And we do want to mention, and Marley will do this too, that we have some brands that support us. And so we just want to be transparent about that if we do recommend things. So we're both supported by Shimano. I'm also supported by Kona Bicycles and by Machines for Freedom. So we'll mention other bike brands, other clothing brands, but just so that you know who supports us.
And real briefly about me. Oh gosh, whoa, sorry, my brain is fried from a day at work. I need to quit my job and just do this full time. Here's my contact information. I do public speaking, although you can't tell right now. I'm usually pretty good at this, and I'll get into the groove in a second, I promise you. We also do workshops. I'm a writer as well. I have a blog that you might have seen before, marleyblonsky.com. Brands that support me are Pearl Izumi and Shimano, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. And I'm also a Noon Hydration ambassador. And really for me, I believe all bikes are good bikes. All bodies are good bodies, regardless of what you're working with, how expensive your bike was, how big or small your body is, and that all rides should be celebrated, regardless of how short or epic or long or whatever. Similar to Kaylee, I got into cycling about 7 or 8 years ago when I sold my car. I moved to Capitol Hill and realized it was just silly to have a car. And then everything kind of blossomed from there. Now, as Elise mentioned, I have a cargo bike that I drive, haul my dogs around in, which has really become a lot of fun. And I can't wait to take them bike camping this summer. But I also enjoy all types of cycling, except competitive cycling. I really don't like to race or go that fast unless I'm going downhill. So, yeah. All right, so we're going to talk about some ground rules for this conversation. When we start talking about our body sizes and who we are, it can become an emotional conversation. And Kaylee and I have done this for a long time, so we're kind of desensitized to it, and we call ourselves fat all the time. But not everybody is as comfortable as we are with this, so we just like to set these to really lay a good framework for the conversation. So first thing is, we don't think that fat is a bad word, and we're going to use it in a really neutral sense here.
Our second rule for our conversation tonight is to stay away from diet talk. And that one's pretty self-explanatory.
The third one is no body shaming, either of yourself or of others. So please, in the chat, if you are, asking for advice on, whether it's clothing or a bicycle for maybe a challenge that you're facing, think about the way that you're phrasing things. So, instead of, my thighs are so large and I hate them so much, please try and rephrase it in a way that is positive, or just doesn't shame yourself. But also, we're all learning this together. We're not going to get on your case if you do make a mistake.
Our fourth ground rule is to just beware of coded language. And this one's a little tricky, but I think a good example is saying, "Oh, you're so confident for wearing that," or "You're so, confident for going out in a swimsuit," is an example that I see a lot. And when you see that word confident, what's the meaning behind it? The way that someone's interpreting that is probably to mean that they think that if they looked like you, they wouldn't wear that outfit or that swimsuit. So that type of language, it's tricky, right? And we're, as Marley said, we're all here to learn together. So this is meant to be a space where we can mess up, and that's okay. These rules are meant to be guidelines, and you're not going to be, punished or called out for doing something wrong.
And then finally, the last one is how I like to live my life, and just a good ground rule for life, to celebrate your body for what it can do, not what it can't. And I think that's all I need to say about that. And I would also encourage, if there's anybody else, if there's any other ground rules that the community would like to establish, please feel free to add those into the chat. And we can agree on those together. But we're going to go ahead and keep going. So we do have a lot of content to cover, not a lot of time, and we definitely want to make sure that we cover any questions and answers as well. So as we get into this, we also want to acknowledge that when we talk about body size and fatness, just like a lot of things in life, it exists on a spectrum. Kaylee and I admittedly have a lot of privilege in this space. We both identify as small to mid fats. We can, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, we can both get on airplanes without many second looks from people. We fit in most chairs. We can go to restaurants without a lot of issues. But when we're talking about being a fat person or fat identity, there's a lot of people who are fatter than us and might not even have the ability to ride a bicycle. So this information comes from a podcast called The Fat Lip. And I've learned a lot about, my relative space of privilege within this. And these definitions kind of deal with clothing, but they can be applied to so many other subjects and topics within being fat. So if you just think about this, like somebody who's a mid-fat can shop at some mainstream stores, but is mainly at plus size stores or online. If you get much bigger than Kaylee or I, you're likely only going to be shopping at plus size brands, and you can likely only shop online. Infinifats are folks who, size 6X, size 30, 34, higher than that. It can be difficult to find any clothing that isn't custom made. So as we are going through this, and I apologize, a lot of these are women's specific sizing. A lot of the rhetoric and work that is done in this that we have seen is being done by female identified people. So a lot of the numbers are coming from the female side. And there's all sorts of reasons behind that as well. So anything else, Kaylee, that I missed?
No, that was great. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And this is just a quick slide from some folks that I know on the internet who gave me these photos. I didn't Google, fat people and put their pictures on here. I actually think some of these people might be on the call right now. So we've got some really, really cool folks on here. Megan doing some hiking. Ebby is in Sweden, and he leads a group in Sweden called Extra Large Biking, or Biking XL, and they've got a really large, and it's actually going global, cycling group there. Sam is an awesome rock climber, influencer, mountaineer. She does some really, really awesome work, and you guys should all follow her. And then Andrea is a really great triathlete. So just some different images besides me and Kaylee, because all the rest of the photos are really me and Kaylee, showing other fat bodies doing cool things outdoors and active.
I think Sam's here. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Sam.
So when we started doing these workshops, it was pre-COVID, and so here's a picture of Marley doing an in-person workshop, and during those workshops, we would take a fair amount of time to do some reflection, personal reflection, because really at the end of the day, everybody has a body, right? And we all have a relationship to that body that's personal, that, you know, there's positive and negative parts of that relationship. So we like to explore that with everyone in the room and really get down to like what the experience is of biking in any size body. And so it's a little different now that it's online, but I think it's still worthwhile to ask ourselves these questions up here. And then if folks feel comfortable sharing in either in the chat or you can unmute and share out loud, and remember you would be recorded, so just keep that in mind. You don't have to share your responses to either of these reflections. In the past, Marley and I have shared a little bit of our own reflection and to get things going. We'll just spend a little bit of time here.
I know for me personally, just to get folks thinking, being on a bicycle makes me feel strong. You know, there's hills that I look at. I can think of Stoneway in Fremont, for example. I look at that and I'm like, there, I would never want to walk up that thing. And then I'm able to ride up it and it just makes me feel really strong. Or there's, you know, been bike packing trips that I've been on and I look back at the mileage and I'm like, dang, I rode 35 miles today. Like I wouldn't want to drive that distance. So riding a bicycle really helps me realize what my body is capable of. Even though sometimes it feels like I can't even walk up the stairs today or can't, you know, clean my apartment because it just feels so overwhelming. But being on a bicycle helps solidify those things. I don't know, Kaylee, if you have anything to share or anybody
Yeah,
else?
something I've shared in the past as a response to the second question. You know, I'm in school, I teach classes, I used to attend classes at the university, and if anyone's familiar with those desks that have the desk part that comes down and it's attached to the seat. For most of my life, those have been very difficult to fit into, and then I became unable to fit into them while attending Oregon State. And the negative feedback that I faced from faculty when I brought that up was pretty shocking. So I think that's an example of a, you know, literally structural, but also put in place cultural limitation, and for my comfort to be in the classroom where, you know, we should all be able to have access to our education. So that's an example of a kind of negative limitation that we'll get into some of the very physical realities of biking that limit folks and don't have to be limitations necessarily. Does anybody want to share any reflection in the chat? It can be more positive than what I end on the negative note.
I can share one that kind of positive, kind of negative. I was on an airplane one time and my body size goes up and down. And this was the first time that the seatbelt didn't fit. And I don't know if anybody else has ever had that experience, but my heart just sank. I was like, oh my gosh, like, what do I even do? And the flight attendant kind of thankfully was walking by, saw what was happening and was like, don't worry, I'll be right back. And I had a really positive experience with it. She brought me a seatbelt extender. And I know that is not the experience for most fat people on airplanes. A lot of fat people will bring their own seatbelt extender to avoid that interaction entirely. And it just becomes a stealth thing. But that was a time when I was able to have my needs met in a non-confrontational way, which was really nice. But also, like, airplane seats are the worst, whether you're fat or small.
Does anyone want to share? You can unmute and share out loud if you don't want to type to either of these questions.
Elise, I love your answer. It helps you feel a sense of control in a chaotic world. Yeah, I think sometimes, having that control is the only way that we feel, or the only sense of control.
Yeah, I love this, Jess, that the physical activity is the added benefit. I think that's so true for me. It took me a long time to connect the fact that I was a fat person biking. And I think in large part because I was biking to spend time with friends or to spend time outdoors. And so for a lot of us, it's secondary.
Yeah. Yeah, great input, Beck and Marilyn. And I'm actually not going to read these out loud in case folks don't want it to be recorded, but I'd encourage people to read in the chat their input.
Yeah, and keep this going. We're going to move on in the slides, but this is a good time to remember to keep using the chat throughout the rest of the presentation, and we'll be looking at it and responding to things as we go. So if you have questions or comments on a particular topic, don't wait until the end. You can wait if you'd like, but we're happy to kind of move the presentation in whatever way works for the group.
Yeah.
Great. So this is where we like to talk about the internal and external work around size inclusivity. So most everyone probably now is familiar with body positivity. It's kind of a big movement these days. I think, was it Marley, you sent the hashtag everybody has roles. That's people are using on Instagram. Some folks have to bend a little further than others to have those roles. And so the way I like to think of it is that body positivity is internal work. It's work that is put onto us to accept and maybe love ourselves, maybe accept ourselves, right? So there's body neutrality, to just learn to accept your body the way it is, or body positivity, to be proud of what your body looks like and what it can do. And so that's been around. Folks are familiar with it. There's a lot of brands that have capitalized. That's supposed to be an and sign, not a dollar sign, but it's kind of appropriate.
Kind of works though.
Typos. And so brands use it, and we're not suggesting that body positivity is a negative thing by any means, but we do want to make the distinction between body positivity and fat phobia and the institutional barriers and societal barriers that people in larger bodies experience. And so I wanted to read, there's stuff on the slide, but there's a few other things in our notes that according to the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, which is a great organization, I would highly recommend checking out their website. Fat people often earn up to 6% less than thin people in comparable positions. 69% of fat people report being stigmatized by doctors. 68% of women in a study of 500 reported a delay in seeking medical care, and 85% reported weight as a barrier to receiving appropriate health care. And you can see on the slide, it's still perfectly legal to fire people based on their body size in many states. So there are an incredible amount of institutionally accepted ways of oppressing people in larger bodies. And even if you choose to do the hard work to accept your body the way it is, you still have to face those institutional barriers. And as Marley pointed out, it's on a spectrum, right? So us in smaller fat bodies, we're not going to experience the same level of institutional barriers that someone in a larger body than us would face. So we like to keep this in mind, because as much as we can do to accept ourselves and even accept others around us, there is real systemic work to be done to change the way that people in larger bodies are treated. Do you want to add anything there?
No, there's examples all over the internet and Twitter of, folks who have gone to their doctor for a sore throat or a broken arm or whatever and get told to lose weight, or, people who have gone for gender affirming surgery and can't get approved for it until they lose a certain amount of weight. And it's like those two things aren't correlated at all. And we'll have resources at the end that talk so much more about this. There's a couple of really great books and podcasts that are way more informed than me and Kaylee are on this. If this is kind of like getting you going and like, oh, that's because I know when I first learned about it, I was like, oh, tell me more. And so we'll give you guys we'll give you all those resources. Okay, so now kind of the fun, meaty part. So how did we get here? Kaylee and I both talked about, we started out biking out of basically necessity. And now we are giving presentations, we were in the Washington Post, and now we have a film coming out. And honestly, life feels a little surreal because most times I still just feel like a normal person, like riding my bike with my dog, or just like being a dumb person on a bike. And if you've ridden bikes with me, like that's largely the experience you get with me. Um, but when we started doing this work, I was at, or the way that I got started into it, I was at the WTF Bike Explorers Summit, and this was it was oh my, I don't know what's wrong with me right now. This is actually a little embarrassing. It was a group that got together in Montana a couple years ago. They have since changed their name to the Radical Adventure Riders, and it was a group of about 100 women trans femme riders. And there was a lot of talk about inclusion and diversity, and how to make cycling more inclusive, but it still felt like there was an elephant in the room, where we weren't talking about size. Folks were sharing, what kind of underwear do you wear when you're bike packing, or, where do you get jackets, or all these things. And all the suggestions that were being shared were for people in smaller bodies. And I looked around the room and realized, cool, there's like one other fat person here. Like, where are my people? And so then started looking around, and I found Kaylee. I think while I was at that summit, you were actually biking across Alaska. And I was like, okay, I need to know this person. And we started like becoming fangirls of each other, and realized there was actual work to be done in this space, both with other cyclists and then with the industry. So we started reaching out to brands, and then it's really kind of snowballed from there. Do you want to share your experience?
Well, similar to that, but yeah, I think, I felt before meeting you, Marley, I felt a little alone. I had found some other groups of people in larger bodies that were hiking and skiing and climbing, but I hadn't found anyone biking in any organized way, or speaking about themselves as fat people on bikes. And so it felt really good to find Marley, and it's just been a really neat experience to be able to talk to you all in a forum like this. It's just, if someone had told me 3 years ago that this would be happening, I don't know if I would have believed them. So it's pretty amazing that we're able to be having these discussions in these spaces.
Yeah, cool. So let's get into the meat of things. So now we're going to talk about like gear and safety, and then some specific clothing recommendations. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So the first thing we're going to talk about is structural weight limits. So a lot of bikes have weight limits. That is a real thing that people in larger bodies need to be aware of and to be educated on. You can often find this information in the owner's manual, which you might not have access to if you are shopping for a bicycle, which means that people at bike shops, workers at bike shops, salespeople, and people in the industry need to be aware of this. I can't tell you how many times I've gone looking for a bike and been like, can I ride this? And they're like, well, do you know how to ride a bike? And I'm like, that's not what I mean. Like, I weigh 250 pounds. Can I ride this carbon bicycle? And they're like, I don't know. And so it's like, cool, let's look at the owner's manual together. There are lots of ways to strengthen a bicycle, not necessarily the frame. If the frame has specific weight limits, but you can change out wheels, you can change out handlebars, you can change out forks. There's lots of different things you can do to make it stronger for the type of riding you want to do. But when you are shopping for a new bicycle, definitely something you're going to want to keep in mind. And if I can stress anything, if you are a person in the industry or who works in a bike shop, please just educate yourself on this. And I think, Kaylee, you've got a good story here about how people in bike shops can approach this conversation without being jerks.
Yeah, this is to do with a specific bike part, not the bike frame itself, but I'd been able, before getting the bike, to look up online. Some of the user manuals can be found online, that the weight limit for this bike would work, but I didn't know much about shocks. It was my first time getting a mountain bike. And so shocks, the ones I have at least, are filled with pressurized air, and that pressure is set based on a number of things. One of them has to do with rider weight. And so I had a friend that worked at a bike shop who was helping me get my bike ready to go. And he had me sit on the bike and held it up and then asked me, he actually shared a story. He said, I had a rider come in, he weighed about this much and he was on a similar bike to yours. And I set his pressure to X number. Does that pressure sound like it would be enough, or should we add more or take some out? So instead of asking me what my weight was, which frankly I don't know what it is, or even guessing what my weight was, he offered a suggestion about, hey, if a person's in a similar size body to yours was to fill this bike, this shock up, this is what they would do. And so I thought that was a really neat way for somebody to approach a subject that can be a really challenging subject for folks to talk about in a public space like a bike shop. So, you might run into someone like Marley or I who's perfectly comfortable talking about their weight and calls themselves fat and is really okay with talking about body size, but you might not. And assuming that somebody's okay talking about it openly, it's probably at this point not the smartest way to approach it. So I really liked how he approached it, and I think I encourage folks to try and do that. Did you talk about bike frame materials at all?
I didn't. And we should touch on that. And we should actually create a slide about that. On my website, I touch on this a little bit about different bike frame materials, but different types of bikes. So bikes can be made out of primarily steel, carbon, and Kaylee, please step in here, titanium,
Aluminum.
or aluminum. And they all have different positives and negatives and benefits, either cost or strength or weight, actual physical weight of the frame, but also different weight limits. So I know that carbon often has like the lower end of the weight limit, same with aluminum. Steel is my best friend. All of my bikes are steel because it's super strong. So if you are a larger person looking for a bicycle, steel can be a really great option for you. But also just talking to a bike shop that you trust and that treats you with respect is a really great option there.
Oh.
Like Bikeworks.
Yeah, go to Bikeworks. So here we just want to get into a little bit more of the kind of detailed components of a bike. And I see a great conversation happening in the chat about wheel strength and number of spokes. This is a huge point I like to tell folks. Frame structural weight limit. So the weight limit of a bike frame is often higher than the weight limit of a wheel. And so you need to be sure when you're checking the frame size that you're also looking at the wheel size, which can be easily swapped out for a different wheel set that can better accommodate your weight. But not knowing that can lead to lots of flats, lots of broken spokes and wheels. It's also just can be dangerous. So I think really the key thing that I like to stress on this topic is this is about safety. So in this picture, I am about 800 miles into a 1,000-mile bike ride, and I don't have working brakes anymore or any brake pads, and I'm 500 miles away from any bike shops. That's not going to happen. And so I'm trying to fix my brakes. It never really worked out. But what I learned on this trip and in processing this experience was that people in larger bodies are going to run through brake pads faster. After years of pedal clicking, I realized, well, people in larger bodies might go through pedals faster as well. Components that bear weight on your bicycle may need to be replaced more often based on your weight. And it's not an exact science that Marley and I know, although we're working with component companies to figure that out. But I would say that what my rule of thumb is bringing extras. So just bring extra brake pads on a long trip, bringing maybe not extra pedals, but making sure my pedals are new or that they're working. So really making sure that my bike's going to work and that I'm replacing things often. Do you want to add anything here?
No, I think you
Great.
covered it well. What is cross-lacing? I don't actually know. I think it's a technique that's used to make your wheels stronger. But I would, encourage whoever put that into the chat to weigh in. Yeah. I don't know what cross-lacing is.
Yeah, if someone can answer in the chat. And the bear spray, I was up in Alaska, north of the Arctic Circle there. So I had my bear spray in a water bottle cage on my handlebars. So didn't see any bears, but just in case.
Yeah.
So this is a slide I recommend, just taking a screenshot if you're able, or we can always send. Marley has a really good list of these brands. And again, apologies that some of these brands are women specific brands, although Fat Lad at the back, Pearl Izumi, Sportive Plus, Aerotech, and R Sports are more gender inclusive. These all go to at least a 2XL, which is still a very limited size range. R Sports, which is that logo down in the bottom right, is a triathlon brand that goes to 6XL. That is the highest that we have seen a bike specific clothing line go in sizing, I think. Have you seen one higher?
Yeah, Fat Lad at the back, which is out of the UK, so shipping does take a little bit longer, goes up to 6XL in both men's and women's, and I believe Aerotech does as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And so I think one key thing I'd like to mention is that you can wear whatever you want when you ride a bike. You do not have to wear spandex and you don't have to wear special shorts, but both Marley and I do wear padded shorts when we go on longer rides and find that it does increase our comfort level. But we also wear stuff over them all the time, like dresses or, baggier shorts. So the comfort level might increase, but you don't need to necessarily sacrifice your fashion comfort as well if you'd like to wear something a little more stylish. Marley wears, I think, a dress and a blouse on our bike tour that is featured in the film coming out.
Yeah, it's pretty cute. Here's a couple of other not necessarily cycling specific brands, but outdoors-ish brands that are doing a pretty good job of making size inclusive stuff. They could definitely do better, and I think lots of folks are working to encourage them to make larger stuff. I would point out Superfit Hero. They recently shifted their model. They used to make, I think, from extra small up to like 5 or 6X, and they recently shifted to only making plus size, and they go up to 7X now. So really broad range of sizes there, and I love their website. Just a really broad range of bodies, and folks doing things that you typically never see in any other marketing. Cool. So let's talk about community building. This is probably my favorite thing to talk about because we're going to talk about group rides, culture, marketing, and this is a photo from the Radical Adventure Riders Summit the year after Montana. This was in Oregon. And honestly, like looking at this photo just makes my heart happy. It kind of scares me that we're not wearing masks and I can't imagine being that close to that many people ever again, but I'm sure we'll get there someday. And I can't wait to be in community with people again. Let's go ahead and go to the next one.
Great. So I'll just talk a little bit about general culture around biking. I think both Marley and I do this work, and I think a lot of you on this call are interested and do this work because we want to get more people on bikes having fun and being safe. And to do that, I think we have to treat cycling as a way to bring ourselves joy And part of that is to treat cycling as a form of joyful movement. So to approach riding your bike as a way to have fun. Maybe it's to get to work, but it's to get to work in a more fun way than it would be to drive there. And some of the ways to do that are to do things like resting when we want to, listening to our body. If our body says that it's tired or hurting,
Or
then
hungry.
hey, yeah, or hungry, listening to our hunger signals and feeding ourselves. And really, it's about biking whatever way is fun for ourselves. So not trying to bike because in a certain way because somebody told us it was the cool thing to do or the right way to do it, but because it feels good to us. And some of the ways that we think that we can do this is by leading from the back, both literally and figuratively. We'll get into that a little more. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the ways that we talk about new riders and experienced riders that maybe ride slowly. Not all people in larger bodies are slow. I'm slow. Uh, but, but even though I ride my bike slowly, I have ridden my bike for a while and ridden pretty darn far. So I don't like to be called a beginner. And I think that the way that we title rides and title experiences as being for beginners or experts based on speed is something that we'll talk about and something I'd encourage you to think about.
Cool. So now we're going to talk about group rides a little bit. And I realize this text is a little bit small to look at. But what I pulled out here is just 4 different examples, real life examples. These were pre-COVID. But now that our president just announced that everybody's going to be eligible for vaccines on May 1st, like, woo, we can start to think about group rides again. And actually, there are some group rides already happening. Anyway, let's just look at some examples of group rides and think about like, do these or do they not feel inclusive to you? So let's see if the animation works. So, this first one, go ahead and click and see if it
Oh,
comes
I'm
up.
so sorry. I was
No, it's
looking
okay.
at all the great things in the chat and got a little lost. Okay.
Actually, let's go back one more and we'll just go through them real quickly. Sorry. So the top one, I'm just going to point out a couple things. This one says it's Bike and Brews is a monthly ride. It says it's a chill social pace. Ride is one way. We ride as a group there, and you ride home whenever you desire. So that's group ride number 1. Group ride number 2, both of these are canceled, but bear with me. You can't really see it, but it says brisk 16 to 18 miles an hour. Within there, it does say how much climbing there is. In the middle, I can't even read it, but it has details about the ride, and we'll talk about that in a second. And then the one on the right says, join Rafa Boulder Saturday for our weekly open ride. Route is approximately 40 miles long with 2,200 feet of climbing. So I don't know if any of those rides sound good to anybody else, but let's talk about, what makes them good for inclusion and what makes them not so good. So the good. The Bike and Brews has a clear, or no, excuse me, the Cascade rides has a clear pace and mileage expectations. So it says they're going to go 16 to 18 miles an hour, and they're going to go 47 miles. You know exactly what pace they're going to go at and for how long. If I looked at that, I'm going to look and say, no, I can't do 16 to 18 miles an hour for 47 miles. That is not the right ride for me. Next one, a great example of what to bring. When I'm going on a ride, I want to know if I need to bring snacks or are we stopping someplace? Do I need to bring anything else? So this one, said, bring your bike and a good attitude, snacks and water. So I know on this ride, we're not making any grocery store stops. This one also says bring money for the ferry. So we're going on a ferry. That gives me an idea of things. This next one is a great example of how much climbing to expect. So that tells me that it's going to be a fairly hilly ride. So maybe that's not the best choice if I don't want to do a lot of climbing that day. And then I love this one because it does say that it's a one-way ride and you're responsible for getting yourself back home. So these are just things to think about if you are a ride leader. Details that you can include in your messaging or marketing. The not so good. So one of them said it's going at a social pace. who knows what a social pace is? Me and Kaylee's social pace might be very different than Aaron and Ed's social pace. The next one, who's invited? Is it all ages? Is it specific to, women, trans, femme folk? Is it only for people under 18? Make sure you detail out who is invited on the ride. And then providing a route description or links. I know that there are some people who love the mystery and the intrigue of not knowing where they're going when they show up to a ride. For me, I've learned over the years that it's a lot of anxiety to not know where I'm going to end up on a ride. So just knowing where the route is going to go. So I put together these 5 easy ways to make your ride more inclusive. And I think hopefully, Donna, this addresses your concern. I would also encourage you to give that feedback to the ride leaders, or feel free to talk to me or the ride committee. I'm actually on the board of directors of Cascade, and we do want to hear that feedback. So please let us know if that's not happening. Anyway, sidebar. So be honest about what pace you're going to ride at and stick to it. So if you're a ride leader, know what pace you're going to go at and stick to that. If you tell people you're going to go 12 miles an hour, people are expecting that and don't want to go faster or slower. I would also encourage you to publish your intended route before the ride. People will make plans around that and maybe split off partway to meet friends for dinner or park their car midway, something like that. This third one is a really big deal, and I can't stress it enough. Have a sweeper at the back of your ride who knows the route and intended destination. This person is a person who intentionally stays at the back of the group. They typically should maybe have some basic mechanical knowledge. So if somebody gets a flat tire and doesn't know how to fix it themselves, they can help out. Or if the group gets splits up in 2, the sweeper can help shepherd folks along. The fourth one, just regroup at the top of the hills. And when you get there, give the last people a chance to catch their breath. I can't even tell you how many times I've been like the last one at the top of the hill. And when I get there, the group is like, okay, we're all here, time to go. And I'm like, you all just got to rest for 5 minutes. Like, where's my rest time? And I'm confident enough to say that, but it took me a long time to get there. Otherwise, I would just, for a long time, I would just like, oh, here we go, like huffing and puffing. And then the last one is to drop the judgment-based descriptions, such as beginner or advanced, when you actually mean like slow or fast, or just put down the pace. If you're going 12 miles an hour or 8 miles an hour or whatever it is. Or, if you're expecting people to be able to hold a pace line, put that in the ride description. Really basic things you can do to make people feel more welcome.
Yeah, I do want to say, I think that we've been talking about this in the context of organized rides, but I think these are also 5 easy ways to make your rides with friends more inclusive also. And so I do this sometimes, say that a ride maybe to me is short, but to somebody who hasn't ridden their bike as much that year, it does not feel as short as it felt to me. And so checking in with ourselves and making sure that we're being open and transparent about what we're getting a group of people into before we all get out there is key. Yeah, and I love Elise's comment that if the last person's the only one who doesn't get to rest. I often feel like I'm the heaviest rider out there, sometimes on the heaviest bike. I'm putting the most power out on my bike to get up the same hill, and then I don't get to rest. I'm like, wow, I'm the best athlete out here,
Cool.
Okay, sorry, Marley, there you go.
No, it's okay. And then kind of definitely along this same line of thought is if you're an event organizer or take part, which I hope you all become event organizers in some way because more cycling events are more fun. There's great ways that we can all make events more inclusive. And these are not just cycling events. Think about chair sizes and strength. So if you're hosting a wedding, strong chairs are great for everyone. Not only can you like lift up your friends, but people don't have to worry about breaking them. If you've never had the fear of breaking a chair, bless you, because it is the worst fear in the world. Also, chairs with arms are a fat person's worst enemy. So if you're able to get chairs that don't have arms, that's really, really nice. When you're setting up a space, providing enough space between tables so people can move around freely. I know this can be hard, especially when we're setting up auctions and trying to fit people in, but these are just things that you can think about when you are setting things up. Providing virtual attendance options. There are fat folks who choose not to attend events because maybe the chairs aren't strong enough and they have experienced this. So continuing to provide virtual attendance. And then back to cycling specific, providing more apparel sizing choices. Some of the custom apparel makers are getting a lot better at this. And I've got a great story about this. So this screenshot is from Steamboat Gravel. It's a race that I'm doing this summer. It's my first race that I got convinced to sign up for. And their apparel maker, who's making all their kits, is Primal. And Primal's size charts goes up to, I think, 5XL. But in the ordering, it only had up to XL in the women's. So I wrote to the event organizers and just said, hey guys, is there any way to expand the kit sizing options that are available to order? I know Primal makes this available. They got back to me and said, yeah, let us, work on it. And sure enough, within a week, the website was updated and now you can order all the potential sizes. So sometimes it just is an oversight on their part and they don't think about it. But as an event organizer, it didn't necessarily feel good on my part to have to reach out and make that ask. But I'm hopeful that more event organizers will start to see fat people wearing these kits and be like, oh, there is an audience for this. It's like a chicken and an egg scenario. And then finally, just think about marketing. Who are you showing in your advertisements for it? And who are you not showing?
So some good news, there are quite a few really wonderful existing communities out there for us people in larger bodies on bikes to learn from. And so we've listed a few different groups. Fat Girls Hiking, it's in the name, it's a hiking group. BOPOMO, Marley, you explained really well yesterday. So
Body Positive Movement, it's a workout group. So a lot of virtual classes happening. It's led by my friend Tashian, where she but she leads workout classes and advises you to do workouts that feel good to you. So joyful movement where, modifying push-ups to whatever level you're at. And basically just making sure that, all of our bodies are moving regardless of what size you're at. And there's so many body positive trainers out there who are doing work like this. So finding what works for you in this space.
Yeah, so there's a few others listed here. Really, the point is that, Marley and I have learned most of what we've learned about these ideas, and the way to do this to include people of all sizes is from these communities that exist already. And there's not yet the same type of group for biking. There's some efforts out there, but in the US at least, there hasn't been a specific group like this, maybe in large part because Marley and I started doing this work and then COVID happened. So, and
we'll get there.
Well, hopefully something like this is coming. So I think it's important to talk about being an ally. First off, thank you to anyone who's here today that is a person in a smaller body that took the time to hear about the experience of people in larger bodies than themselves on bikes. That's really amazing. And I really appreciate how many of my smaller bodied friends and family members have taken time to learn about this and then been allies for me. I'll share at our first workshop, I started by saying that to be an ally means to ride alongside your friend all day. So if they're going slower than you, you should hang back with them. And then right away, people were like, other people in larger bodies were like, I would hate if somebody slowed down to ride next to me all day. and that's the extrovert in me coming out. I just want to talk to somebody all day. But and so I think we put up here riding preference. Really, no matter who you're riding with, you should ask how they want to be ridden with, or whoever you're hanging out with or talking to, ask them how you should show up for them. Everybody is an individual, and it's the same goes for people in larger bodies. So I think you figure out what works for the people that you're hoping to support, and then do that, show up for them that way. Thinking about the types of comments that we're making about certain types of rides. Maybe we have spoken negatively about shorter rides, or comments we make about types of bikes. I think that comes up a lot when we talk about e-bikes. I think it's changing, and I hope it's changing, but the type of maybe elitist comments that come out of the biking community that we can avoid, that help folks feel more supported. Backhanded compliments, I think I'll just share a short story. So I'm often riding behind my friends, and on one occasion I was riding up a hill and I was a bit behind my friends, and a person on a bike passed me on the uphill and said to me, "You can do this, you got this," and then sped along by, past my friends, and then went on. And my friends waited for me at the top of the hill, and when I got there, the first thing I asked them was, "Did that person say anything to you when they passed you?" And they hadn't said anything to my friends in smaller bodies when they passed. And so I think that's a good example of a time that somebody thinks they're giving you a compliment, but the way that I received that was that that person was either, one, surprised to see me out there, or also thinking I was out there, to lose weight or change the way my body looked. And so those types of assumptions and that type of coded language when we make compliments or say things to folks we don't know when we're out on a bike ride, they matter. And so I just want to encourage people to think about the way that they speak to other people in the biking community, and make sure that we do that in a supportive way. And then another example of how to show up as an ally is to call ahead. Maybe you're going on a bike ride with bike rentals, or maybe you're going kayaking, and you call ahead to that company to make sure that your friends or family in larger bodies are going to be able to participate. They're going to be able to fit in the clothes that they have to wear, or fit into the kayak, or they weigh, the bike can has a weight limit that includes that person. So those are all just examples. Keep throwing stuff in the chat if you have other examples of ways to show up as an ally. Then, and I'm cognizant of time, we're towards the very end of our presentation. And so I like to mention here, when we talk about marketing and publications, we do this, I think it's really important to talk about this topic. One of the reasons is that in a recent study, looking at a variety of different news reporting, it was found that only 11% of people in larger bodies were wearing professional clothing when they were featured in news reports, and that about 60% of people in larger bodies featured in news reporting were headless torsos. So the majority of mainstream news media is still featuring people in larger bodies in a very specific way that is not a positive way. And so I think it's really important that companies like this top photo is an Eddie Bauer campaign, correct? Sam's all over this presentation. And this bottom photo is from a magazine article that I wrote, and I was featured on the cover of Bicycling magazine with this article a year ago now. And so I think that these types of featuring people in larger bodies in a positive way just has such a huge impact on showing other people in larger bodies, hey, there's people like you doing these things out here. And so we're just really trying to encourage that folks that have the power to select who is showing up in these images continue to do this type of work. Anything to add here, Marley?
Yeah, two quick things to add. Before and after photos are the worst. So if you are going to show fat people, like, please don't do before and after photos. Like, just stay away from that. And then if you're going to use stock photos, like, you could show fat people in stock photos. It's okay to do. And I put a resource into the chat. There's a group called Can We All Go, that actually, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they were at least pre-pandemic. That was like crowdsourcing reviews on restaurants about, chair sizes and booth sizes. But they also put together plus size stock photography photos, which is awesome and something like I hadn't even thought about. But just good resources there, especially if you're a person who is in marketing or a position of power to, do these things at your work. So cool. So
And I saw Evan had asked a question, what would be a better response, right, to that person who passed me and gave that maybe backhanded compliment or chimed in. I think I really love when someone passes me and says something like, "Great day for a ride, huh?" Or like, "Oh, just so good that we could all get out here." I don't love when people pass me and don't say anything, and I try not to do that to other people because it just doesn't feel very social or welcoming. And so I think there's ways to make it seem like, hey, we're all out here together. You're part of this community too. That are the types of things that after that happens, I always feel like, oh, hey, that was a nice person. So I guess that's what I try to say.
you can always compliment us on our bikes.
Yeah,
You
cool
can do it
bike.
for anybody.
That
Everybody loves a
makes me feel
compliment.
really good.
Cool. So what's next? I mean, this is an ever evolving list, and we're always welcome or open to doing this presentation more, for your place of work, or if you've got a cycling group or whatever it might be, we can always adapt it as well. So we've referenced this a couple times, but we do have a film coming out with Shimano. It'll be released on YouTube on March 22nd at 8 a.m., which is really, really exciting. It's a beautifully shot, beautifully filmed. Kaylee and I went bike packing in Oregon for it, and they filmed us for it. So follow either of us on social media or Shimano, and you'll see it released there. I am teaching a bike camping for beginners class. It's a 2-part class starting on Saturday, and then the following Saturday, it's a sliding scale. There's details on my website, which I think was posted further up, or just go to marleyblonsky.com. It's the first thing you'll see. We also host weekly Zwift rides if you are a person who does indoor cycling. We do kind of the stick together option. So we're all banded. So it doesn't matter how fast you're going or how slow you're going. And we also chat on Discord during that.
I don't think
And
you
that's,
need Zwift now.
what was that?
You could just join on Discord and talk.
That's true. So we do it at noon on Fridays, and you're totally welcome to join in for that, or get in touch with us if you're like, what is Zwift? I want to do this, but I have no idea what you're talking about. And then this last one is something that Kaylee and I did not start. It is out there. It's a Facebook group and Instagram, Fat Bottom Girls Cycling Group. It's not gender inclusive, but it is a resource that's out there, but it's not ours necessarily. And then finally, I would say take a screenshot of this. It's also on my website of resources of just different podcasts, Instagram pages, different groups, and then books. And I would say, especially Instagram pages, if you are a person who uses Instagram, diversifying your feed with people's bodies that look different than yours, or maybe they do look like yours. I know for me and Kaylee, we were talking about this yesterday, it's brought a lot of joy to my life. And it's been really refreshing to see other people doing this work and being happy as fat people and just living their lives. I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
That's great. Yeah. And I think a version of this list is also on Marley's website, a very important and helpful website.
Yeah.
And then, oh yeah, we can figure out how to do that. Put the slide in the chat. So thank you to Ice Cream, but seriously, thank you to Bikeworks for having us. And most of these photos in our presentation were taken by Gurchel Falaskan, who's a bike photographer in Portland, really fantastic. So thanks to her for that. And yeah, I think we can turn it over for discussion now. And I hope we have about 25 minutes, it looks like, left.
It sounds like there's some questions about the resource list, so we can do discussion, but let's just hang out on the
Yeah,
resources slide. And feel free to come off mute to chat if you want. And then I guess I would leave it up to Jess and Elise and Ed for what time we need to stop so you guys can close it out.
So this is Pax. I wanted to say thank you all so much for speaking this evening. I know you can't see me on video, but but I am a fat writer, and I really appreciate being the feeling of validation of joining discussions like this, and I look forward to kind of checking out the group. I wanted to ask specifically for the resources, do you have any specific queer resources that you would suggest for queer fat folks who bike?
You can follow me.
Absolutely. I'll shoot you an email.
Okay, that's a really good question. Maybe we can collaborate on something.
That sounds wonderful.
Yes, hold on 1 second. I have a book.
Okay.
1 second.
Super stoked.
It's great. It's right there.
Sorry. So this book
Oh yeah.
it's called Gears for Queers.
Yes. Yes.
It's written by two folks out of the UK. And I believe, I don't want to misrepresent them, but I want to say they either one or both identify as fat. And this chronicles a bike tour that they did together, and it is a wonderful read. Whether you identify as queer or fat or none of the above, really, really, really good book.
Thank you so much for that. I took a screenshot, so I will check that out. And then for additional information, I'll just shoot you an email. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you.
I just have a comment. My husband is the one who found out about this presentation, and I just was here in the room while it was happening. I'm a fat biker as well, and honestly, I'm just feeling so empowered and inspired by you guys. And like, I said this to him twice, like, wow, I really want to be friends with these people. I'm queer, so I'm like, Marley, I want to hit you up. I want to get to know you. So you guys are awesome. Thank you so much for the work you guys are doing. So hopefully we can ride together someday.
Yes, I'd love that. Thank you. Wait, how do I do the cool little heart? You'd think after a year of Zoom, I'd know how to do this. Like
reactions
button, yeah.
Oh, for us, it might look different.
And everybody throw up a heart, please.
How do I do it?
There we go.
Hey, I'll jump in. I'm Lindsay. I'm in Portland. I'm also a fat cyclist and queer. So shout out to all the queer cyclists as well. I also just want to say that I really, really appreciate this. I work in the cycling industry in a Portland-based company. Feel free to slide into my DMs if you want to talk about that.
Which company?
I work for Velotech. So we're Bike Tires Direct, Western Bike Works, and Trisports. I have personally done a lot of work around advocating for diversity in my company. And I work in the marketing team. And I am kind of to this point where I'm a little exhausted in like this advocating work, and our company doesn't even carry clothing that fits my body. unless I were to go to Pearl Izumi Men's 2XL. So I would love to chat about like how that conversation could get started and like how maybe allies within the company can help support that.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's a space Marley and I are finding ourselves in a lot more lately. So I think you've probably got the most experience since our day jobs are not in the biking world, but we should all chat. And we should also all ride bikes together. I'm just so happy there are other folks in large bodies here that are in the region and we can all hang out.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Lindsay, I will say that as a Pearl Izumi sponsored athlete, it has been really challenging because most of their stuff doesn't fit me. And I've had really candid conversations with the designers and their design team about what works and what doesn't. And they do want to do better, supposedly. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this. But it is challenging because it's like they're constantly like, hey, can you take a measurement of your neck or your arms or your thighs? And it's like, I don't like doing that for myself, but I feel like it is going to help our broader community. But then I also feel this like responsibility of like, if I send these measurements and it works for me, but doesn't work for other people, like have I then failed our community? So I'm hopeful that it's getting better. I mean, for Shimano to put themselves kind of on the line with this story that I'm really, really proud of that we're getting out there. I really do hope that companies like yours will see that there is movement happening here and momentum and so many more people getting onto bikes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for touching on that.
Yeah, Catherine mentioned like making your own stuff. There's actually a person in a larger body up in Bellingham that was fed up with not having good mountain bike clothes and just started their own company. So certainly people kind of taking the reins there. I know for me personally, I just don't have an interest in like making my own clothing and or making a clothing brand, and so I try to spend my resources and time pushing the companies that make clothes that I like aesthetically, but maybe can't fit into, or that aren't made to fit me rather, just do better. So, I think there's a million different ways we can approach it. And that's certainly one.
Oh yeah, Kaylee, I actually am lucky. I have a friend who's a retired fashion designer.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God. I could just say to her, hey, Marion, what should I do? Right? And it's like, okay, but I'm not interested in making a business. But it's like, yeah, those are the friends that you've got to find.
I need a fashion designer friend.
Yeah. I mean, and it doesn't matter, right? You want to make it this size? Sure.
Yeah.
Let's do it, right?
Haley, do you know the name of the person in Bellingham?
Yeah. I know the name of the group. I'll give the name of that group.
Okay.
Rather than her personal name in case. It's Cosmic. It's Ride Cosmic Dirt is the name of the mountain bike apparel group. And I'm sure you can figure out who it is by looking at that, but I don't want to share her name in case she wouldn't prefer that. Any other thoughts or questions, or maybe things you didn't like that we said, or things you want to change, make sure other people hear?
I have a question. Are you guys planning on doing any group rides in the future soon? Or is that COVID dependent?
I think it's really COVID dependent. We were really hoping to even like do some like bike packing, bike camping trips. And I think like I'm honestly feeling really optimistic today with Biden's announcement that everybody who can get vaccinated will. But I've been really conservative with my gathering of other people. So yes, I'm confident in saying it's going to happen, especially with the support of these brands. Like Shimano has said, like, you guys want to do something, like, we will give you money to do it. So yes, it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when and where. Are you based here in the Northwest?
Yeah, in Seattle.
Okay, yeah, that's where I met
Are you
you.
guys in Seattle? Okay.
I'm in Seattle. Kaylee's in Corvallis.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
yes, but who knows when.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Do they, and Laura, quick question, do they still make kids do the presidential fitness test?
I was just talking about the presidential fitness test last night with my partner and how scarring it was for me.
Yeah, I don't know if it was as awful for people not in large bodies, but as a fat person who like has never done a pull-up in my life, it was the worst. And then to like have it announced to everybody, and then how slow I ran the mile, like presidential fitness test, the worst.
Oh yes, I'll post that clothing. Let's see, I want to get it right.
Hi Marley, this is Tom. Can you hear me?
Yep. Hey, Tom.
Hi, I just want to say, first off, thank you so much for your blog about bike camping. Me and my friends found that like 4 or 5 years ago, and we since made like 10 trips to Fairbairn Park. And like we would do it during our work days and go after work and then come back and go directly to work the next day. And it was just like such an adventure and like just made such a positive impact on my life. So I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks. We were just talking with the Bikeworks team about Fay Bainbridge earlier. So for folks who haven't gone bike camping before, it's a really close park to Seattle. I realized that I need to update that because I kind of talked disparagingly about Fay Bainbridge, that it's like camping in a parking lot. And it kind of is, but it's also really lovely.
It's hit or miss. Like sometimes the camp hosts are like not friendly and they like discourage it. And like it depends. But
Yeah.
Also, I work at Rad Power Bikes as a product engineer, and we definitely trying our best to be inclusive and work on fitting everyone, including like very small people with small hands, and like just all we're trying our best with what we can do to like make it better.
That's
Awesome.
Thanks.
That's really good to hear.
Hi. I just wanted to say thank you for talking a bit about pacing and how pacing is described. And I think you really articulated some of the frustrations that I've had in the past that I really couldn't verbalize. So thank you for just giving me more of an understanding of what was bugging me about these different things. And it gives me just a good idea of how to be mindful about pacing in the future too. So thank you.
Thanks, Amy. That I'd like to mention, I didn't know that bikes had weight limits, and I didn't really know how to name some of the comments I was getting and the frustrations I was having on group rides until Marley and I started working together. I had no idea. I knew that I was a person in a larger body on a bike, and I knew that I was mad a lot of the time when I was riding, like, but I just didn't know why. And I think that having a community like this and conversation like this is just so helpful to be able to figure out what those things are so that we can try and change them.
Yeah. And I think on that note, Kaylee and I are not the only people experiencing this. So to those of you who are also living this experience, like, you're welcome to join us in this effort. Like, yeah, we're kind of the leaders of this right now, but that doesn't mean there's not room for the rest of us. Like, this is really a community effort. And we're here for all of this. So, if we want to start a Slack group or whatever that looks like to build this community and create the momentum, we're here for it. We don't have the answers. So if there's other folks who want to, lead rides and need our platform or our social media to make it happen, like, talk to us. Like, we're here for it. And we only have a limited amount of bandwidth ourselves, but we're here to help. I think maybe on that note, we turn it back over to Bikeworks unless anybody else has anything else to add.
I would add one thing that one of you talked about when we ran through this presentation that I don't think was said tonight, and I wanted to reiterate for folks about allyship. If you're in a smaller body and you want to be a good ally to fat folks, one example you gave was, like in a restaurant, kind of being the friend to ask not to sit in the booth, or on a ride to kind of be the person to sweep and set the slower pace. And so not always kind of like putting that burden of asking for the accommodation on the fat folks of the group, but because that can be really taxing and exhausting and kind of always doing that calculation. So I just appreciated that as a tip for folks who don't identify as fat, but like wanna make the community more inclusive and everything. So I just appreciated that tip.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. And that's a great tip for being an ally to so many marginalized groups, not just fat folks. Wherever you can use your position of power to help other people and to lift other folks up, I think to always be aware of that.
Yeah, it definitely reminds me of conversations we have about race and racism, where white allies can speak up in the moment, call out microaggressions or institutional barriers when they see it, and not kind of putting the burden to say something on the folks of color all the time.
Exactly.
It does kind of translate across. So yeah, great tip. So with that, thank you all for coming. I'm going to kick our sort of closing words over to Ed Ewing, our executive director here at Bikeworks. Ed, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, amen to your comments about the similarities between width and the commonality between race, Elise, and allyship. Appreciate that. Marley, Kaylee, thank you. This was great. Thank you for joining us tonight, and congratulations on the Shimano film. And you said it's dropping March 22nd. Was that it? Make sure to watch that. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Kaylee, I really want to hear more about the your trip across Alaska. That maybe another speaker series on that.
Yeah, and it was supported by Lael Wilcox's scholarship that she gives each year. So to keep that on your radar. I think the application deadline passed this time around, but hopefully that'll keep happening every year.
Wow. Yeah, we'd love to hear more about that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. Again, this is a monthly event that we're holding here at Bikeworks. Really want to thank you. We'll be sending out a survey to better understand what you'd like to see as far as our monthly speaker series, and any feedback you have for us or any questions. And don't forget, again, tonight's discussion has been recorded and will be available on YouTube. So if you missed anything, you'll have the ability to watch it again. And then one side note, one programming note is Bikeworks will be turning 25 June 13th. So please see our website, perhaps in the chat about Bike Excitement that's coming up June 13th. It will be 25. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure. Marley and Kaylee, thank you again. And then Marley, also congratulations on joining the Cascade board. Well done. So thanks, everyone, and good night.
Thank you for joining us tonight, everybody. Really appreciate all of your great questions and comments and just hanging out.